Coming at dead last is going to be the Kazekage Rescue arc. My issue with this arc stems from the later half of it, but let me first talk about the positives. Surprisingly enough, Sakura was a good highlight in this arc, as we see that her work with Tsunade is finally paying off, making her an actual asset to Team Kakashi. She really made her mark as a medical ninja specialist after she saved Kankuro from the poison Sasori planted in him. She also made a starlight moment with Lady Chiyo in her fight against Sasori, with it being an overall entertaining fight. I also like the general growth in Naruto's character, where we see genuine concern over Gaara, given that he also has a tail beast inside of him, as well as being pursued by the Akatsuki. And speaking of which, Gaara becomes a more likable character, not to say that he wasn't already when he was a villain, to where we are genuinely concerned for his well-being, as well as his role as Kazekage. Aside from that, it pretty much goes all downhill from here. For starters, the inclusion of Itachi and Kisame feel unnecessary, as not only did they just pad time for this arc with their fights, but the fights themselves were pointless, due to them not actually being there to actually fight, as they were just clones of themselves. I know that they had to be clones because the real duo would have killed everyone there, but that further proves my point as to why they shouldn't be in this arc to begin with. Next would be the inclusion of Team Guy, or at least their use in this arc. Going back to the Kisame fight, it was pretty much useless, and the fight against their own clones was just a time waster for the arc as well, as they pretty much did nothing to help the main team out. Then you have the Naruto and Kakashi vs Deidara fight, which dragged out and wasn't all too eventful, aside from Kakashi using Kamui for the first time. I can't be mad at this arc, since it expanded the lore of the Akatsuki and gave more credence to what a Jinchuriki is, but aside from that, I'm not giving this arc too much credit. Definitely not a bad arc, but in my opinion, it's the worst. The war arc comes next as one of the worst arcs in Naruto, but this placement is more so based on circumstances. I'm including everything past the 5 Kage Summon arc into the slot, so I'm including Naruto undergoing his 9 Tails training, the initial beginning of the war, the 10 Tails revival, and Kaguya showing up. The initial beginning of the arc is downright abysmal, with it all just being fights with White Zetsu clones, as well as some fights that narratively sound cool, but amounted to nothing eventful, like the Team Asuma fight and the reunion between Kakashi and Zabuza. The main issue with this part of the story was that it dragged, but was saved by the revival of Madara and is outstanding for showing. The reveal of who was behind the mask was cool too, though I personally saw it a mile away of who was going to be behind the mask, and the fights from this point on is overall exciting to see. My main issue with this arc in general has to deal with a bunch of retcons. First is with Orochimaru coming back to life, as that felt out of place, as well as him just knowing how to revive the previous Hokage that were under the Reaper's death seal, and it also bringing Minato back, which in of itself isn't bad, but his upgrades with the Nine Tails powers and the random introduction to Sage Mode was out of place. It also doesn't help that since the beginning of the show that Minato was propped up to be the main ninja, the strongest the Leaf has come to know, but is trumped over the first Hokage simply so that he could be a suitable rival to Madara. If it was just this stuff, I wouldn't be too upset with this being a thing, but it just adds to the overall negatives I have with this arc. I don't like the idea of reincarnates in the story, particularly with Naruto and Sasuke, as I feel it cheapens the narrative of it all, as well as the half-baked inclusion of Kaguya. I go into further detail in my video on how the ending of Naruto was trash, so be sure to check that video out, but all in all, this ruined whatever respect I had for the Naruto franchise at this point, as it was fabricated to a certain degree. That being said, there's still a lot to enjoy about this arc, mainly with the fights being shown, such as Kakashi vs Obito, the allied shinobi forces against Obito and Madara, as well as Naruto vs Sasuke at the very end. This arc definitely has some highlights, but not enough to save it from being this low on the list. The Tenchi Bridge arc is rivaling with being the worst arc in the series for mainly with how the initial first half was a bit boring. I don't personally care for the inclusion of Sai if I'm being completely honest, but it's not like I hate him, nor would I remove him from this arc. Him being an emotionless tool was cool in of itself, since it contradicted with Naruto's personality, but there wasn't that big of a payoff aside from Sai just wanting to know more about emotions in general, which isn't bad, but isn't all that present in the remainder of the series. It also didn't help that Yamato was substituted for Kakashi as well. Now I also don't hate Yamato either, I just don't care for him, and he doesn't stand out aside from being a wood style user, only heard of with the first Hokage at this point of the story. But the story does pick up once the team arrives at the Tenchi Bridge and faces off against Orochimaru and Kabuto. Naruto vs Orochimaru is an amazing fight and stands out as one of the best, and going a bit forward, once we see Sasuke near the end of the arc, he stole the show as we get to see what the 3 years of training resulted for him. He decimated all of Team Kakashi and proved that seeking Orochimaru for power ended up working well for him. All in all, a pretty good arc all things considered, but it doesn't save the fact that it was initially a bore to get through. Just so you know, going forward, I pretty much love the arcs I'm about to mention, like they'd be at least in A tier if I had to rank them that way, so it's going to be hard for me to rank them the way that I did, but bear with me as a lot of these could be interchangeable anyways. Coming up next for one of the quote-unquote worst arcs is the Akatsuki suppression arc. I love this arc so much due to it not being hogged by Naruto and the other main characters. While Naruto had his moment to shine, we stuck around with side characters from Team Asuma like Shikamaru, and they were used to great effect in the story. This is the first time a death in the show resonated with people, as people have grown accustomed to Asuma, so it became more impactful, as his death resulted in Shikamaru and his team to have the spotlight for once, and Shikamaru having one of the best vengeance moments in fiction history. In a show where the side characters get derailed as the story went on, it was nice to see them being active one more time before it just became the Naruto and Sasuke show. That being said, I still like Naruto's training during this arc. While I feel like this part of the training should have been done during the time skip so that significant growth can be shown towards Naruto, I'm still pleased with how it turned out in this arc and was excited when he was able to pull off the Rasen Shuriken against Kakuzu even at 50%. Speaking of which, Kakuzu and Hidan were great overall inclusions in this arc as well, as we see diversity within the Akatsuki and how they all have their own goals to tackle as well as they still carry out their mission to capture all the tail beasts. Amazing arc overall and definitely underrated. Now, putting the Lands of Wave arc this slow on the list may tick some people off, but realize that I already mentioned that these arcs going forward are already amazing and can be interchanged, so cut me some slack. This was an amazing introduction for not only just the main characters, but also a bunch of concepts being shown at us in general. The ninja aspect was already cool enough, but couple that with interesting characters like Kakashi and Zabuza to show the full potential of what it means to be a ninja, and we have a recipe for greatness. Speaking on Zabuza, he's a villain that I feel doesn't get talked about enough, especially for being the first main antagonist of the show. He showed the darker side of being a ninja, all the while using Haku as a tool in display of that. Bro was also the first villain to be talk no jutsu'd in the series, so that has to be worth something. One of my favorite moments too is when Naruto assumes the power of the Nine Tails to full-on wreck Haku. It shows the potential dangers the power of the Nine Tails can have on the ninja world. I also appreciate in general the character dynamics of the four main characters, specifically with Naruto and Sasuke, as while they may butt heads every once in a while, they will be there for each other when it matters most. This was also the arc that helped Naruto form his own ninja way, setting off how Naruto would go about being the Hokage he sets out to be. Overall, really solid arc, and I feel bad putting it this low, but it's a testament to how great the remaining arcs are in the show.